Okay. Please take your seat. Also because if you don't take your seat, you might risk losing it. There are very few seats left. Here are some people that might have to stand or not, or just squat. We are part of, we are an event in a big camping that's taking place in Amsterdam right now. So you can squat, you can do whatever you want. Good evening. My name is Luca Bertolini. I'm a professor of urban planning at the University of Amsterdam. My role this evening is, besides trying to fight with this incredible light that's trying to kill me, is to moderate the evening. The evening is about cities and mobility. Actually, that's my big passion. So I'm really excited to be able to do this. I'm excited for several other reasons I'll tell you in a while. But it's also an evening also about mobility in Amsterdam because I mean it's a very interesting moment in Amsterdam and in the mobility in the city. A moment where we are rethinking in many ways in which direction to go. So we hope also to contribute to that, but of course also to relate to other cities. And I know that many people come from these other cities. But maybe for curiosity, who is from Amsterdam tonight? And so who is not from Amsterdam? Oh, okay, fantastic. So that's already a very nice encounter. So the question, maybe you have seen on the website, the main question, the key question of this evening is nothing less than the question of whether we are asking the right questions in the first place. And we are going to explore this issue, not so much, and certainly not only criticizing or reflecting on questions that are asked, but trying to identify the questions that should be asked. And quite literally, we are going to do it together. So if you think, oh, I'm going to listen to some interesting, inspiring talks, you will get that, but that's definitely not the whole of the story. And certainly what you will not be able to do is to, just ask questions or enter in a discussion. No, because the speeches will be there. There will be a series of very diverse and quite interesting speeches, but we will use them one after the other, and I will explain that later, to slowly build up an agenda of the questions that need to be asked in the next days, weeks, months, about mobility in the city, mobility in Amsterdam, and we really will try to mobilize your collective intelligence to help us, the speakers and others, to do that. So that's really the idea, and also an experiment, I would say, of even if you have the word common in mobility, we are trying to common also this event. We'll see what happens. We are really excited, but also a bit maybe not nervous, not the right words, but ready to anything. And before we start with the pitches and the exercise, I will explain in a bit. I will give the word. I give the word now, and just a few words before, to Anna Nikolaeva, who's actually the heart of this whole thing. This is the final event of a series of seminars that Anna organized on cities and mobilities in the last year or so at the University of Amsterdam, inviting, inspiring people from abroad, but also from the Netherlands, and having them interact with PhD students, but also people from outside academia, and inspired, building up on a series of lectures. This event has been conceived to, in fact, make of that series a present, a gift that to the city and to the people here tonight. I said final event, but it's very important to say that in this case, final is not closing. Actually, if this would be just a closing event, in a way it would have failed, because it's a final event, but an opening event, an event that hopes to open a trajectory. Anna is a postdoc at both University of Amsterdam and University of Utrecht. She studies, in particular right now, urban cycle innovations, but she's more broadly interested in cities and mobilities. And I think I should give her the word to say more about what she's fascinated by. So, Anna, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, hi. Why cities and mobilities? Well, I think that nothing and nobody in the city exists isolated from some form of mobility. Everything and everybody is coming from somewhere, and everything and everybody is on the way to somewhere. And we also encounter the city while we are on the move. There is literally no other way to encounter each other and the community and the built environment, but through mobility. So that was the starting point of the seminar series, Cities and Mobilities, that I've been organizing for this past year, thanks to the XL Seed grant from the Center for Urban Studies, of which Luca Bertolini is the director, by the way. I'm going to talk just a little about what we have done, why we have done that, and what today's evening is all about. So the seminar series was a series of events. Every time we had a lecture by an international scholar on some aspect of mobility. And the feature, distinguishing feature of the seminar series was the very broad, rich understanding of mobility. We talked about tourism, but we talked about design of intersections. We talked about migration, we talked about cycling, walking, and sustainable mobility. And today, the focus is still very broadly. So whichever mobilities that shape cities that you want to bring up for the discussion, we are open to that. Even though some speakers will talk more about some mobilities than others. We had more than 100 participants, and I've asked them what did they like about the seminar series, why they kept coming, kept bringing new people, and they said that this rich view of mobility is what they appreciated, because the city is shaped by so many mobilities, and you can't isolate it from one from another, and they liked to meet different perspectives. We mostly had scholars and students, but as the seminar series evolved, there were more and more practitioners coming, people from the city government, entrepreneurs, consultants, activists, just people who were interested and so forth. And they really appreciated meeting each other and having deep conversations that they could engage for a long time, for a long conversation on a subject. So that was, as somebody said, meetings of the minds. And I hope that our today's events can also be such a meeting of the minds. Of course, I can't cover these subjects that we discussed. Just a few insights here, because some of them will come back in discussions. We've talked about the difference between how we experience mobility in the city and how mobilities are discussed in urban planning language. Also, another important theme was the mobility as diversifying force, as a force that makes cities vibrant, interesting, exciting, but also as a flattening force, and that makes cities exclusive. We talked about the role of platforms and algorithms in the city, of course, Airbnb, Uber, bike shares, and how all those platforms and algorithms will mediate the way we encounter each other in the city. And finally, we came to the conclusion that when we talk about the future of mobility, transitions to potentially more sustainable or more just mobility, we need to talk about what cities and places we want to live in. So cities, you can't understand future of mobility or future of cities isolated, essentially. So what are we doing today? We are sharing some of those questions, some of those insights from the series, and people who are going to give talks today. Some of them were part of the series. And we're closing this. We're closing the series as it was. In the format in which it existed is over, and that's great. But we are also doing, as Luca said, we are doing something together. We will try to co-create an agenda for discussion on city and mobility in Amsterdam. And please bear in mind that this is serious on the one hand, but it's also a game. We are not going to claim that this is the agenda, this is the best agenda, the only agenda. Of course, but it's going to be a medium for us to talk about things. And it is a gift to the city, to all of us, in a sense that as you will see it on the screen at the end of the event, anyone is free to pick it up. If you like point number 4 and you want to do research on this, or you want to create an event on this, you're totally welcome to do that. But we are also want to have, we are closing this, but we also open up a possibility for further conversation, because what happened during the series is that a community developed, people who kept coming and kept saying, I want this to go on, I want this to continue in some form, maybe in another format. And I said, well, why not? If we have, so we have this kind of core community of 30 to 40 people who expressed this interest, and we decided that we can go on potentially as a discussion forum, but in the format of a relay race, or estafette in Dutch. What that means is that if somebody from this community wants to organize an event in any format, site visit, exhibition, spatial intervention, lecture, reading group, they can do that. And they can invite the community to participate. And then after that, maybe somebody else wants to organize something on the basis of what we've done. And so if there is energy, commitment, and so forth, there will be future events. And if that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, which is also fine. But what today I'm also very happy to do is to invite all of you to be potentially part of this community, because we want the Center for Urban Studies to be a bridge between the university and the city. And in that spirit, and in a very kind of low-tech fashion, I'm going to send this around. And if you want to be kept posted, you can leave your name and your email. And even if you are so inspired at the end of it that you actually want to organize something, you want to kind of continue, you're welcome to contact me. So I think that sets up the agenda for today. Obviously, if you want to talk to me about the series or what can happen next, you're also welcome to approach me afterwards. And I think we can begin.
So now the crazy part begins, and let's explain. So we have 3 rounds, the first with 3 speakers, then an intermezzo, and another with other 3 speakers. They are connected somehow, but they're all very different speakers. I'll introduce them in turn. So there are academics, but also very other kinds of people, people working in the city, politicians, journalists, entrepreneurs, and so forth. But the first round, loosely around the theme of language, we have 3 speakers, and each of them will have, you'll see this pattern coming back, 6 minutes to make a pitch. And then we have 6 minutes where, inspired by or solicited anyway by that speech, they will all end with a question. They will be here and writing here, and I will go around getting your ideas. I will try to use that speech to make 1 point for the agenda. So in the end, we'll have 7 or maybe something more. If we have 2 very important points, that part of the room wants 1 point, the other that, we'll put both of them. We are open to those sort of things. So that's what we will do, and we learn by doing. It's not that complicated. And we start with Marco de Brommestruth. Where is Marco? There. Marco is associate professor at the University of Amsterdam, interested in many different ways in cities and mobilities. Also in the Twitter world, well known by, I guess, all of you probably, as the cycling professor, even though it might well be that he doesn't even name, you do name the word cycling. We don't know, we'll see. We'll try to, but the floor is yours.
Language allows us to communicate. An important evolutionary advantage that we have as humans and as humanity. It allows us today to create and co-create ideas and together imagine about the future, about joint goals and joint means. And without a formal and agreed upon language that we speak this evening, many of you would just be listening to a hissing and puffing guy for 6 minutes. So it's actually good that we have language. But language is also very performative, and it limits us in our thinking. And in that sense, a picture says more than 1,000 words, and this picture is, for me, a very good example of this. This is a picture that you can describe in different ways, but at least two. The same reality that we all see and all watch at the same time. But some of you might see two people under an arch and a dog, which is either sleeping or dead, I don't know, or a general. And if some of you didn't see one or the other, as soon as I tell you that they are two, you're also able to switch. So you can now choose to see the same reality in a different way. Well, that's a very powerful thing that you can do. So you can switch now. You cannot see them both at the same time, but you can switch. So this fact that the way that we look at this and the language that we use to describe this is already interesting, but it gets even more fundamental if we consider that this language is not only describing this picture, it is actually realizing our future reality in the first place. So this is called performativity. In academia, a person that really is connected to this idea is Kuhn, who studied paradigm shifts. I'm not going to explain paradigm shifts in detail, but it's the idea that after a certain shift, we look at the same reality in a different way and we cannot unsee it. So we cannot go back to before. We really see things in a different way, and therefore we also act on them in a really different way. So language is performative. It guides our thinking, it guides our doing, and it structures the way we shape our futures, especially so for professional language. So the language that mobility planners use to talk about mobility in this case is a professional language. And think about, in your case, you all have probably, you are or you have managers, and the words that managers use become performative. They create your reality and they lead you into certain directions. Academics know, for instance, the H index. It becomes a thing that we all strive for. But I'm sure that anybody, if you can now think about terms and words that are shaping your daily lives. I would say that this is especially true in mobility. Because immobility, at least as how I know it, is a very hard field. It's hard materials, but also hard in language. It has numbers, indicators, models to describe this reality, which gives this idea that there's nothing to discuss. This is the language we objectively use to describe this reality. And I'm sort of posing this here as an argument. I think this is not the case. I think that actually we can make a choice to use different language, and then we will start seeing different things. And that's incredibly powerful, so I wanted to give to you as a gift as well. It's a powerful thing to learn to see how you can actually play with this and also play with the fact that others play with this as well. So the example that I use is, again, I'm not going into detail, but transport planners in the room will know this, is the idea that we describe the reality, we describe people in our models, in our transportation models, simply as homo economicus, as a selfish person, individual that tries to optimize his or her own utility. And in that same reality, mobility is very important here, is a derived demand. It's something you do not do for the sake of it, you do it to get to places. So it's a disutility. You want to minimize this. And ideally, this creates a new utopia where you have zero travel time. So that exists in this logic. And this logic leads to ideas like automated vehicles, hyperloops. It leads to ideas that we have to fight congestion. It makes it quite logical. People are losing travel time, so we have to fight that. It's a problem. And you can see this in car commercials where they sell this to you, that cars are actually helping you to make travel time irrelevant. And this all sounds beautiful because it's a utopia. Who doesn't want to be faster somewhere? It sounds good. But I would say that if we are not careful, this utopia, as any utopia, can quickly become a dystopia. And it has to do with this logic that blinds us for this logic. So if we talk about being underway as a disutility that can be minimized, we ignore the fact that the empirical data suggests that it can't. So this data shows the average travel distance of a Dutch person in 1950 and 2010. And in 1950, the average Dutch person traveled for how long? Hour and a half, 1.5 hours. And in 2010? 1.5 hours. So we have been spending the equivalent of about 8 billion a year to save travel time, and we saved exactly 0 seconds. So instead of a gravitational pull that the language suggests, there's a centrifugal force that's happening. It pushes us apart, and it creates realities like this. Well, I would say this is Dubai. They're actually proud of this. They show this as a brand. I would say this is dystopian. So if we don't put the human but technology and system central, and if we follow the utopian dream of seamless travel, then we have to realize that we create a future in which the human factor will be further and further reduced. Optimize the machine, marginalize the human. So my question to you is, do we want that? And if we don't want that, how can we help the city of Amsterdam develop a language in which mobility planning becomes something that we all own and the utopia we all strive for? Thank you. Zero word cycling.
Yes, great. So, Marco, you can take place here because now your task is to help Marco with this easy question. Some ideas about a language, a different language that could help talk about mobility in a different way, lead in some different directions. Yes, here there is. Maybe you can say your name.
My name is Pascal van der Noort. I work for Willem Mondial. I will not pronounce the word. I won't pronounce that. Anyway, my suggestion is to talk about traffic jams.
Yeah.
They are being defined by the time a car uses to go 5 kilometers further.
Yeah.
And the one definition is 80 kilometers for the 5 kilometers. The other one is 50 kilometers.
Yeah.
But I suggest 0 kilometers. Then the traffic jam would disappear, and there's no incentive anymore to fight traffic jams.
So redefine traffic jams?
Exactly.
Oh, and only a traffic jam is when there's 0 kilometer per hour?
Yep.
Redefine.
What is total? Okay.
Stop. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we are collecting ideas, so don't be afraid of come up inside. Okay, there's.
Ger Nijman, more artists and especially poets to change language.
Okay, you have more artists and poets, but you have an idea of, are you an artist or a poet yourself? No. Do you have an idea, do you have some example of a word by a poet or artist that inspire you in your work?
I'm not a poet, so I have a lack of
You're
words.
not a poet, so you don't know it.
Maybe there is a poet or a artist here that, is there a poet of an artist that wants to throw a, okay, anything else? Yes, okay, 1 and 2.
I'm Peter Pelzer, Utrecht University. Maybe we should, for 5 years, forbid ourselves to use any reference to the means of transportation. So no use of the word car or train or bike. Just talk about what do we experience while being on the way.
Okay, so it's a negative. Okay, that you free up space for other. Well, okay, of course, yes.
Hi, Peter Bitzok from Bicycle Eyes. I kind of think like we could just reclaim these words like traffic, congestion, and now when I say these words, you already think of like a vehicle traffic. So let's use it more and more often with like pedestrian traffic and pedestrian, congestion, and so kind of like take it back.
Take it back to pedestrians.
Well, take it back to anything. There's a congestion of apples there in the in the kitchen, or there's.
Okay, that becomes interesting.
Is it only reclaiming or also ridiculing?
Well, both, yeah, of course, both.
I like the congestion of apples, I must say. Other hands, yes. Oh, we have a little forest here. I like that.
Hi, Hi, my name is Klaar, and I think that we should use no longer travel, but all the time cruise, because cruise has air and has this quality of entertainment in the word itself. And I think we should claim back the pleasure of traveling instead of like it being a nuisance, going from one to A to B.
Okay. There were two hands here. Yes.
Yeah, hello, my name's Charles Carey. I was just thinking maybe you could ask children. They often have an imagination and a language and a freshness. And if you pose them their thoughts, they could add to the dictionary.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My name is Marina, and well, this was a little bit the theme of my master. And what I would propose, it's instead of talking about conflicts in transit, talking about desirable interactions in transit.
Okay. Wonderful conclusion of months of hard work. No, I'm totally serious.
Maarten, University of Amsterdam. So I have the opposite proposal. So when we talk about mobility of immigrants, we use words like tsunami, flooding. And I propose to use these words for cars, bicycles. And so it gives a very different meaning, I think.
Yeah, very interesting.
Okay, it's a bit abstract. Perhaps.
This is Samuel.
Hello. Only use words if you legitimately believe that they are describing that which they are describing. To put an example, value of time, cost-benefit analysis. If you're an academic, only use it if you really believe that that is a meaningful concept.
Okay, so be honest to yourself. Yeah. Okay.
My name is Antonio, and I think we should play with time. And so I think that the possibility is, instead of saying how much time does it take, experiment with how much time does it give, or how much time can I enjoy it. And how do you say what time is it in Dutch? Is hoe laat? And so instead of you guys saying that, you say just what you say in English, which is what time is it, instead of assuming that the time is passing and is getting late, giving a sense of rush.
Yeah, I was asked to inquire who's speaking Dutch, and not one of the speakers will come back on these issues of different languages and what they mean. I know how's the time going, because we also need to.
We have a congestion of time.
Yeah, but we have to synthesize, or don't you think? Yeah, that's the task. Yeah. We need to derive, we make it difficult, an agenda point or a couple from this.
What is the overarching thing that you see here?
Do you see something overarching that we can, translate in an agenda point or two? You have an idea?
Are different words for the same thing?
Use different words for the same. Play with words.
Playful. I see various people arguing for playful use of language.
Playful use of language.
I think the synergy will be done by you, or should I do it? Okay. Playful use of where should I do this?
You can use a different color, maybe.
A tsunami of ideas here. Different color.
Playful use of language.
Oh, no, leave it. I will just.
Yeah, still 1 minute. Somebody.
Can I help with the foot check? That's okay.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Peter, and I'm inclusive in 02025 movement. Yeah. And could we maybe change the expression kilometers per hour by your carbon footprint per hour? Okay. So you can travel in a sustainable way or in a polluting way.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, we are both adding divergence, but we have one convergence on the playful. You can do both in the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, playful is very good, but I think it's important to use some language not only for scholars, but for all the people, to understand for all the people.
How do you do that?
Yeah, that's talk to the common people.
Let the common people.
Yeah.
Like to the children also.
Yeah, yeah. But could you imagine that playing with language could be a way to explore and finding ways of communicate? You know, I like the idea of playing because it's a process. Maybe we have to look for this language by trying to use it. Yes.
So I made it language by and for common people. Everybody. Inclusive language.
Hey, so I'm just going to wait for them to finish.
Yes. Yeah. He's a human. He needs time to write. Yes.
It seems to me that there's a theme here about coming up with a language that describes time as a benefit rather than just a cost. That seems to be a theme coming in.
Okay, so I think. So the red are the agenda points. Can you do something with this, Samuel? Yes. Okay. Well, we see. Okay. Thank you, Marco. Yes, you keep helping. But we move now to a second speaker, Talia Fekade she's a journalist. Where is Talia? Oh, there. She works at a correspondent, and her theme is mobility, actually. And she has already written a series of for those who are familiar with the correspondent, who read this article, where she's really challenging the way we talk about mobility, but also the meaning we give, and try and turn around ways and triggering very interesting discussion. I mean, you know, the format of correspondent is that people can engage in a discussion at the end of the article. And so we're really happy that she's here to share something with us, which we don't entirely know, so that's fun. Please. Thank you.
As a 7-year-old boy, my father was involved in a traffic accident. It was 1951, and it happened on the streets in the city of Arnhem. The pictures are a little bit before and after. This is 1941, and this is 1961. As you can see, there were no pedestrian crossings yet. There were no traffic lights or traffic signs. And my father always has this guilty look on his face when he has to explain what this big scar on his knee comes from. And so what he explained is that his father was waiting at the opposite side of the road, of the street, at the bus stop. And my grandfather, and he was a journalist as well, just as I am. He was reading a newspaper. And my father was so overjoyed to see his father that he just forgot everything, dashed towards his father. And then he walked under a moped. So that's how he explained it to me. He walked under a moped. And mopeds were also new things in those days. So my father says he has learned 3 valuable lessons on that day. 1, that a child should learn to never just cross the street all of a sudden. And 2, that parents should avoid to be seen from the opposite side of the street by their children. And 3, his father should, of course, have never read that newspaper. So newspapers were sort of the smartphones of those days. Now, I'm very grateful for my father to teach these lessons to me and to my children now. But did he walk under a moped? So in 1941, we see this man walking, maybe running, on the street, not on the pavement, right next to the tram. And I think if you look very closely, I think it's a woman in a dress walking next to a car on the street, not the pavement, in 1961. And this is no selection bias. These were the only 2 pictures I could find of this era. So did my father walk under a moped? Or could you also say that a man on a moped hit a 7-year-old boy? I think that the scar on my father's knee, for him, symbolizes the idea of a reckless boy. But I'm wondering, could it also be a symbol of something way bigger? The ending of an era that people just walked on the street and carefree and without any danger to them. So now I want to fast forward 67 years to 2018 and show you what our streets look like today. This actually is a sneak preview of a website we are developing right now to collect and crowdsource, hopefully maybe with your help, the coverage, the news coverage of traffic accidents in the Netherlands. And so I'm doing this together with Marco and also with Jan Dirk Stegeman, who's here in the audience. If you're interested if you have ideas about this or want to talk about it, please get in touch with us. For now, I would like to focus on one little word we see all the time in many of these snippets, geschept. So geschept I would translate in English probably as shoveled, scooped or shoveled. So you can shovel the earth, or in Dutch you can also shovel ice cream, so schep ijs. But we see in these news snippets a lot of people being shoveled, mostly by cars. And from traffic victims, from their accounts, I understand that many people end up either dead or very, very gravely injured, maimed for the rest of their lives. So now, interestingly enough, the city of Rotterdam took this word, so the word made it to a sort of a traffic sign this year that was put up in the center of the city. I made a homemade English translation. So, you too can be shoveled by a car, the decision is yours, wait for green. So they put us a sign as a temporary experiment in Rotterdam. And yes, they found out that more people on bikes wait for the light to turn green if you put up a sign like this. So that's good. But this is the conversation you want to have in the city with the people living there. So this actually is the mayor of Amsterdam, freshly appointed, Femke Halsema, jumping a red light and apologizing in media and promising she will never do it again. So as a little thought experiment and a play with words, I replaced some words in the sign. So this is just Paint Windows program. So firstly, I decided to replace the word shovel by the threat implied that you will be maimed or killed. Then I changed the word car for car driver, because it aren't guns that are killing people, so maybe it aren't cars that are killing people. And I switched the word decision for risk, because is it the decision you're making? Yeah, maybe it's also a risk you're taking, or is it a risk being imposed on you? And lastly, I decided not to focus on the traffic situation, but on the people in the traffic situation. So you too can be maimed or killed by a car driver. The risk is yours. You're more vulnerable. So it's just to play with words as a provocation a little bit. And then when I found out that 3 out of 4 people in Amsterdam who are killed here in traffic each year are being hit by a car or another like big vehicle with 4 or more wheels, I decided to make one last edit of the text to focus on the inequality of this, sort of permanent inequality of this situation. And I made it an active sentence. So I turned it to a car driver can kill or maim you too. His vehicle, or her vehicle of course, is faster, bigger and more expensive. Give him priority. So now this for me isn't about cars. It could be about moped riders. It could be about reckless little 7-year-old pedestrians, or should we call them kids? But it is about vulnerability. And I think for me, I became conscious of the fact that I should more consciously express who exposes who in traffic to danger, and who is owning the risk of this, and who is suffering the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question. This is my question.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And this is sort of, we are ad-free at the correspondent, but I put an ad just for the sake of it. So you can sort of, also just so you can see what we are doing, you can use this code. You can, yeah, you can see it. So.
You want money from the English speaking people?
Sorry?
You want money from the English speaking
Yes, we also want your money. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Talia, you want to write or you want Marco to write? What you prefer? Marco helps, yes. As before, I will go around, but if you want to come in, but you see the question. This is in a way similar, but also different. There is a clear focus and also some strong words as violence and suffering and ways to lessen them. So from this perspective, again, collecting ideas and how can language help to do this, to lessen violence and suffering on our streets. And again, we just brainstorm and then we'll see whether we can find some, yes.
I learned a new word to change the expression chauffeur into shoveler.
Okay, shovelers. Word full of shovelers. Yes.
I would say one of the things is putting blame where it's meant to be. So instead of using the term car accident, really say it was a crash or, just much more blatant language to describe what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, because I can follow that. I can follow that, but how would you do that in Dutch? That's.
I don't know, I don't speak Dutch.
Yeah.
Very
good.
Can help us? Aanrijding en ongeluk.
Yeah.
I started actually with ongeval, and then started to, when I started to talk to victims, it started to
well, we look for
abstract.
We will look to translation is our next step.
Maybe good one, yeah.
We will keep open and be plural in language. You had a hand.
Your name, Peter Cox from Chester. The giving priority to those who cause the pain, cause the vulnerability, is to reverse the responsibility for action. It is simply to say, well, the person who poses the biggest threat, you need just to get out of their way. And do we want to build our cities around those, prioritizing those who have carry the biggest guns, effectively? That's epistemological violence rather than just street violence.
Okay, so what you propose?
Actually, the target of this is not the ones who are being victimized. It is the ones who are victimizing those who they run over.
The comment that I also wanted to make, who's the audience that you change your language for? So it's often the victim blaming, so how can we also legally enforce certain perspectives, for example, through driver's license, when a driver does the license, what kind of language is then used and how this can be enforced at a much more systemic level rather than having signs targeted at the victim. So how to avoid like a behavioral change that changed the behavior of those that, are affected the most.
And did you think that any of the exercises that Talia did in trying to use other language were going in that direction, or it's a very different one?
I think the example was really great because it makes it much more, I like how you inverted the logic and how it really emphasizes the problematic, and I wonder how this can be brought up to a much broader audience, especially car drivers and local authorities that are then empowered to make streets more safe.
One of the things we have been discussing is that the direction of the sign should then also be changed. So it directs to pedestrians. So you should switch 90 degrees then.
Well, we can print a bunch of your posters one night, cover the city, and see what happens.
Juri Jongeneel. Maybe it's not only language in words, but also with symbols and signs. In Spijkenisse, they put up a sign for a crossover path, and they put a symbol of John Cleese doing a steady walk. So that's for the car drivers or the shufflers a sign to slow down because that's the cross path. So it's not only words. Maybe you can use symbols as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not only words. I go there because there are people that didn't talk yet, and then so I give precedence to new voices. Sorry.
Hi, thanks. My name is Valerie, and I was just thinking, when, especially in car advertisements or also traffic planners, they speak about the individual freedom of a car. You know, you have individual freedom, but it's often the restriction of the commons, right? I mean, the car driver has his freedom, but what does it mean for the other ones? So I was just thinking maybe to reverse the language, or I don't know.
We fast. No, maybe I shouldn't use that word, but we try to collect more ideas. So.
I think my idea is different. I think the cyclists in Amsterdam think they are the king of the road, and I've lived in many towns in Holland, and it is really in Amsterdam they think they are the king of the road. And I think the message must be that they aren't the king of the road. I think the drivers in the car drive very slowly in Amsterdam. They are really careful drivers. If you compare it...
Yeah, but in terms of language, what would you suggest?
Yeah, that's your... tell the cyclists they are not the king of the road, and you can show it with a picture. When they are, you show a cycle on the road, and that's you are the king of the road. Yes, there you are.
So your point is that nobody should be the king of the road, and in Amsterdam it's cycles. So yeah, okay, clear. Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Thomas Satermeyer, I was thinking of the smoking packages that you could put stickers on car advertisements, and you can kill others and show nasty pictures.
Hi, I'm Bas Hendricks. The language that we use is primarily focused on the type of person using the road. So it's very focused on a cyclist, on a pedestrian, on a car driver. Maybe it's an idea to focus more on the shared responsibility and the shared usage of the whole infrastructure space.
So we are the road is of all of us. Let's. Yeah. Yeah. So let's. It's already been said, or so we have no time. No time, right? So, no, but we need to have a synthesis. Sorry, I have to take some. You are helping the so only synthesis proposals are allowed. Yes, very good.
Tie back to the former sheet. It's all about time well spent. So it's like enjoy the ride, and because you get accidents.
Oh, stop. We're looking for something new.
Yeah, so everybody's focusing on what is going wrong, but you should be focusing on when you have a good time, you won't drive into people. So it's like the subtext here. It's it's okay to speed, but be careful, don't get hit. But don't speed. Enjoy the ride.
Yeah, but still, I'm trying to find something. We already said that, and it's nice to connect, but we need synthesis.
Well, I just say, at first inside, I liked your last proposal of the poster. But I mean, what I see there is a car driver that probably was, obliged to take his car to go to work. Mm-hmm. His car is maybe not economically, so it's a miserable person who killed somebody. Mm-hmm. So in fact, I would say, let's say to the car drivers, don't risk to become miserable killing somebody and ruin your life. Take the car if you can. So I would just say that to the driver.
Okay, we were not. We stop, and I don't think you can figure out something.
I would say that I don't find the right word, but the causer is also a victim. Right? So that makes it very complex.
But
what's a good word for causer?
But what I do think as a common, I mean, there's a lot of discussion, but I break in Because what I do think that's really different this conversation, in spite of all the differences, is that the who question. The who was not really reasoned in the first round. The who, and it could be the victim, the perpetrator, it's us, it's them, but it is about people. Okay, but maybe we stop now this round. There's something going on there. Thank you, Thalia. Somebody already doing a crowdsourcing in real time, sending you. Okay, very good. But please thank you very much. The third and last in this language round is Jan Dufus. Jan works for the city of Amsterdam. He used to be a strategist. It's not an easy word to know what is behind it. Now he's working on innovation and he's also another stranger. So maybe you should maybe take the floor, and if you want, same with your story, show who you are, what you think, please.
Yes, to make sure everybody understands, I'm not here in any official capacity, so I made the ugliest slides of the whole evening, so it's just my story, and I am an official at the City of Amsterdam, but this is just my own observations. Okay. And I was wondering, how many people in this room can understand Dutch? Okay. Oh, well, there's lots of them who don't, because I think we also already saw in the previous presentation with the word geschept. I will talk about another word that's very, well, Dutch. Let's start with, I have two examples of policy in which language plays a powerful role. And this is the first one. This is about making, about the role of cars and pedestrians in the city of Amsterdam. This is a project on increasing the space for pedestrians, that's how it's called. More space for pedestrians, so you can walk without being interrupted by cars from the central station to Leidseplein or even Waterloopplein. It's now being carried out step by step with great results. This is the Amstel, only recently 2 weeks ago opened, and you can hardly imagine it was ever like that, two-way traffic, no pedestrian space at all. This is how it is now. And the current administration even wants to go further. They prioritize pedestrian, cyclists, and public transport. Well, you can see it over here. And then they invented this great word, and it's called autoluw. And nobody actually knows what "luw" means. And I think this is an asset. This is a good thing because it provides you with a direction and not with a destination. So if handled carefully, this can be a real language trick to get some great results in the city. But obviously, lots of this whole agenda autoluw goes to the traffic department, and they try to talk about it in traffic language. So, well, this is a graph I made myself 5 years ago. It has since showed up in almost every policy on mobility, and has put something well, it made people think of mobility not only as a flow thing, but also as a spatial thing. But then again, thinking about autoluw, you still see lots of, well, technical stuff. What are the places where inhabitants per square meter in combination with public addresses are, and all kind of metrics are being tried out to see where this autoluw program can actually have the most impact. And I think this is a shame because this beautiful term gives you lots of room to actually have these type of discussions. Not on where it should be from some kind of technical overarching view, but what does this actually mean for people living in the city and individual streets? And then it's not about how wide is this pavement, and is this be the right street? Is it the right street to carry out this program? But okay, with whom do we make the street more autoluw? And for whom, and how are we going to do this, and what is the design of it, and can inhabitants influence this design? So I think this autoluw word gives it's a positive development. It's a great invention, and now is the challenge to keep this direction, not the destination, and not make it too technical. That's one. Then my second subject is about the North-South line and about the planning of new large-scale infrastructure. Well, this is the North-South line, as you can see. I think it's aesthetically a beautiful artifact now in the city of Amsterdam. Cost 3 billion euros, lasted for 15 years, but now it's there. Hooray! And apart from it being a beautiful architectural artifact, we can of course discuss that. Now the first measures of its success are being published, and then they're framed as it's framed as a success because we have more public transport travel. Wow, okay, and there are more kilometers traveled by public transport, and that's the effect of the North-South line. And then it struck me as odd because such a large investment is obviously not only used. The goal is not only to make us travel more. The goal is it transform the city as a whole. It has economic, social, cultural, all types of effects that might even justify that 3 billion euros. But I don't think this is the only thing. More travel. Okay, more. Why do we need more travel? We just saw that we won't be faster. We just travel more. Or we won't spend less time traveling. That's what we just saw. Well, luckily, a researcher is starting also trying to find out what is the effect on the area development, the real estate in the neighborhood. But this whole research program, which I think is essential to see what the effects of the North-South line actually are, is 100,000 euros on research money. It has costs a lot of people lots of time to actually find this. And if you think of the 3 billion euros spent on actually building the thing, I think, well, this could have been better. But we have a great chance of improving on that by planning new metro lines, which various departments are enthusiastically doing. And I skip a few because my time is I'm almost out of time. And my cri de coeur, to use another language even, is that we should not be sucked into these type of discussions, only speaking about congestion and full trains and travel problems, and we don't get fast enough from A to B. Because if we spend billions of euros on such a large scale, well, new development for the city, it should be about who is using it and what for, and can they not only are they saving travel time, but are they able to find new jobs, to visit the family easier, etc., etc. So I'm really looking forward to find a way out of this type of well, paradigm, and I think you can help me by that to find answers on this question. How can we increase ownership of policymaking on mobility by changing language?
And oh, yeah, thanks. Ownership, you mean by citizens or general or?
Yes, I don't mean ownership in any financial or judicial way, but just you feel that the problem is your own. It's not a technical thing that needs solving, and then we just continue. But it's something that you actually experience almost bodily, I'd say, because you are in that train and you want to go somewhere, and that's somewhere that you want to go because you want to be there. Yeah. Because you meet friends or you have to work, etc. So this and with ownership, I mean, let's break it open, not using models, but using actual experiences and involving people who experience the problem to also solve it.
Yeah, so talk about mobility to make it. Oh, they're already. So I don't let the people speak.
Yeah, I think one of the problems in this one is that we often, sorry, Ananda Groa, yes, we often talk about getting from A to B, and we then reduce the whole idea of mobility to a mathematical almost puzzle, whereas you rightly say it's about having the freedom to move. And I think Maud, where are you, Maud? She, well, maybe you want to say it yourself, but she always says it's not about transportation, but it's about transformation. So yeah, let's not make it into a mathematical puzzle.
Transportation, transformation. You have to. We need your question, right? Yes.
My name is Marcus Popkema. I think it's all about quality of life, and if we have a little bit more often meaningful debate with urban designers then we might move a little bit more in the right direction.
So both a term and also the kind of disciplines to involve. Yes, different disciplines to involve.
My name's Hay. I'm a student at the UvA. I think the reason why we always think it's getting from A to B is a puzzle is because the forefront of mobility is about efficiency, saving time. But I think the speaker's correct in saying that there's a certain social touch to the idea. And I feel like it's not just about the design, it's all about how we feel, and it's kind of like the policy should resonate with people who aren't in this field with these niche lexicon. It should be approachable to people so that people can contribute, and so that policy making or policy documents can be more attractive also.
And do you have any, I completely agree, how can you make this more approachable? Do you have any suggestion how?
I've got no idea.
Anybody?
I mean, yeah, not really.
Maybe somebody else think how.
I think I like the word approachable.
Maybe
Though.
there's an answer
nice
here or there. We'll see.
Hi, I'm Bob. I think the problem in policy making is how more complicated it is. The sooner the doors will be closed by government organizations, and especially in complex questions like mobility and city development, you have to open your doors to have like a meaningful discussion with people. And not only, as I said, not only here the scholars who are here or the usual suspects who are here, but the people who are actually traveling, the people who are living in the suburbs of the like outside of the city ring of Amsterdam, who has a total other way of transport where cars are facilitated instead, and there's a lot of problems around public transport. So you have to talk to those people.
So you are saying, again, it's more a process that you have to talk to different kind of people. Also people that live in different places, for instance. You know, we see often here people that live within the ring road. And
inside the ring and beneath the I River, it's simple. You can take your bicycle to go everywhere. But when you go from the other places, then it's a total other.
People they live in different conditions. Yes, first year, then I come back.
Well, maybe you can use words of other fields of policy. So in Rotterdam, they use vervoersarmoede. Because of in Rotterdam Zuid, there's a lot of social, poverty. Just poverty, social poverty, and no, they use the word vervoersarmoede.
Transport poverty. It's a clear message. Yes.
I would like to talk more in terms like safe places and unsafe places. I think a lot of people in cars don't realize how lethal and killing those things are. And they say, we drive very careful. I'm an engineer. A car has as much energy as 150 bullets. And we don't carry a weapon into a bar. We shouldn't carry a car next to our children. So if I think your map where we said this is a safe place for people on foot or on bike, and you call it a safe place, then the others are unsafe place. And you can ask yourself, is this a place where I can let my 8-year-old run around without stress, or a stress-free place, something like that?
Okay, poverty and wealth, safe and unsafe. Okay, yeah, this might be indeed words that speak to a wide public.
Hi, my name is Leonard Nout. I think sometimes it can be very simple. When we talk about things that we'll do, like a knip, so you cut the through traffic, but actually you're not cutting the through traffic, you're creating space. And the same with the north-south line, it's not connecting the north through the south, it's unlocking the city center. So just by changing the name of things, by focusing on what it actually will do instead of what it does from an engineering perspective, you might get more ownership.
You're good.
maybe the next transportation plan in Amsterdam without any numbers in it. And I think we always, the politicians ask for numbers to justify stuff, but the numbers almost never justify what we want. So can we build a story that we actually trust is the right story without numbers?
I love this one. I challenge the land use planners to make a plan without a map, but now I'm going to challenge the transport planners to make a plan without numbers. That's a great...
You are the last. Can you attempt a synthesis?
I was actually going to follow up on the numbers. Can we, because in policy we talk about what we want to measure, so can we change what we want to measure, which is actually meaningful? So can we change from travel time to amount of people checking in the tram on Foursquare, or amount of people posting a picture of their street on Twitter or on Facebook, and so working towards new indicators.
This may be a thread which we have no time to explore, is that of meaningful, using words that are meaningful for people, for their everyday life, safety, poverty, and many others, and don't use numbers. Interesting. Okay, we have, I think, you want to do something with...
I'm running into idea congestion again, so we have to...
I propose I think that one meaningful, using meaningful words. I mean, again, it's it's an attempt. It's important to remember the cloud of ideas. No, sorry. I want you to... Okay, one word.
I say people and meaning above money.
Okay. Well, people and meaning. For some people, maybe money is meaningful. But anyway, meaningful for people. Yeah, me inclusive, meaningful. We close here, Jan. Thank you, and thank you to all the speakers of the first round. And thank you for the public. It was a lot of work, but we are producing an incredible amount of things. It will be very difficult. I see Samuel typing. We'll see the Wonder Kid, what we produce. The agenda will emerge, whether we will identify that or not. So now we still keep playing this game, but we shift a little bit in mode. We have an artistic intermezzo. I mean, it's still part of this thing, so don't think, okay, now I can relax. No, it's still part of Stimulate Agenda. Bart Klaar is doing this. I was talking with him, trying to explore in his website. It's very difficult to pin down what he does, and he's happy with that. Actually, I discovered that it's a bit deliberate, but things like art, people, places, knowing, engaging, maybe, yeah. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi. Good evening. This is an artistic intermezzo. I propose a lesson in scale. Everybody read? Good. So it's about the city, but it's also about something much more. We have a rich history of a merchant town, Koopmanstad, harbor city. We have a direct relation with the sea, and it's all man-made. That's the lesson in scale. Channels, being the Noordzeekanaal, Amsterdam-Rijnkanaal, Merwede-kanaal, Noord-Hollands Kanaal. Made with wheelbarrows. Can you imagine? And for what reason? He is a poet. Now I know. We have to exchange telephones later. Hey, yeah, maybe the numbers. Oh. All the wheelbarrows for harbor, right? So this is the Houthaven. This is the harbor now. Gasoline. But now I go to the city center. This is the 60s. And it's dwelling in public space. It's the damslappers owning the square. Also in the 60s, some very futuristic visions of Amsterdam. This is the stations area. And then it wasn't so futuristic because, bang, demolishing the city center for the sake of mobility, right? The metro works, demolishing the inner city, the posters of resistance for social struggle and for a good livable city and housing. It was not so much that the people of Amsterdam were against public transport, but it was how the city organized that. To demolish, to deport, to speculate. We could still hang that poster today, I think. And then, this is the artistic intermezzo. There's this beautiful sculpture in the Jode Breestraat. And it's, like myself, it's a jack of many trades. It's a historical monument composed out of authentic pieces of stone from the area, from demolished buildings. But it's also a tribute to the vanished old city pattern. So it's a monument for the things that have passed there. Please, if you pass by the next time, look, it's a nice sculpture. And the waterways with the wheelbarrows were not the only thing. This is Schiphol in the 60s. This is Schiphol today, being the state-of-the-art logistic hub we have. In 2010, it was no longer the city as a harbor or the city as a merchant town, but it was the city becoming the merchandise itself. This is a red carpet. And this is the red carpet, right? So we invented a method, the Puccini method, to construct a red carpet for our visitors, consisting out of very interesting compositions, right? My argument tonight with you is how it actually denies a sense of place, how it's forced uniformity to construct a city where you're never somewhere, where it's really about that you're always moving, that you're in a flow of transience instead of route to route somewhere. And you know, if you like to move, that's the city for you. But if you want to stand still, you're a problem. And it's interesting how this design 10 years ago started to be very successful, and it won an award not long ago. But I think for me it is the problem itself, the public space. How it's very well suiting the flow of transport, how it's like making the city into this thing we don't want, really. And of course, in this flow of people, also shit happens. Next to Cafe Nasty. I'm almost finished. Okay. For some reason, this is in here. So we're very much connected, right, with airplanes and travel, and you have a 10-day cruise from Amsterdam to Basel. But you also have bigger ships like this, going all over the world. And you know, we are an open city, and we always have been. But how to exercise being open and also have a space of our own? And for me tonight, why I'm here, with the question, are we looking for gold? Or are we sticking our head in the sand? And I tell you this, my goal would be, together with you guys, to co-own and to common public space again, because we really need to make another step with the city, right? Thank you.
Okay, but you want... So let's help Bart recommon or common for the first time, or in a different way, public space. Maybe it's not about mobility at all, or...
Yeah, so I think now you're straining the topic to global capitalism and to owners of assets, and what do we offer to the public who live in Amsterdam, in a city. What can they do? What is the value of labor? Is there value now of labor? So it's, I think now we're going to, with your topic, we're going to the discussion of automating all the jobs, so there's nothing left. So what do we do? How do we give people, what is, so it's a kind of labor question. Can we, so then probably discussion about the basic income and how do we redistribute wealth, and what is the point of because I think the only reason I think Amsterdam embraced itself in this, as you said, become a merchandised material, is to produce some kind of wealth for the people who live there. Otherwise, there might not be any reason to.
But Barry is asking help from you to recommon public space. So you are explaining all the forces behind it. So how to recommon is just accepting it, or it's just a fact, or is there hope somewhere?
I don't know. Is it better that my native country wants to close borders and allow no one to come in? So,
so it's becoming really complicated. Yes.
Yeah, I also need help. But no, I think for me the public space is the place where the mobility and the meeting and the living together takes place. So it is also about labor.
Yeah. But let's try to reconnect it also to public space, because that's when it becomes interesting. But we are really challenging ourselves, which is great.
Yeah, I find it really interesting how you corrected yourself when you were about to say logistics and you said mobility, because the theme is mobility, but it's kind of the current operations of the city introduce a logistical logic. So how do we distinguish between people and freight being efficiently circulated around the city versus kind of claiming space for stopping reflexivity and inefficiency. So I kind of liked, I would have wished you have put up the slide a bit longer, where you had a bit more text and less images, but that addressed the logistical logic that emerges, Or maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that.
No, you can't, because, and you also, I need to follow up, because again, you are providing a very insightful analysis, elaboration, but okay, Barry asked, okay, how can we change this? Moving side, you can also say, oh, there's nothing we can do. So
this is also stopping, place. It's planning place for stopping.
I give it to you, then I see hands there and there.
So no, I think I would be curious for.
Okay. But the next person should, if it doesn't move from the analysis to design, or I will take the microphone violently.
Peter Cox again. Commoning and dwelling, being in the place. It's the antithesis of I don't want to say mobilizing, but mobilitizing. Dwelling is our being in the place, and the commons is the place that we dwell together.
Dwelling together.
Marco Tromsgoed, why do we not have these meetings outside?
Yeah, it's cold, but it's so much energy that probably we don't have too much cold.
Yeah, Charles, very interesting in what you're saying, that every space has become a space for mobility, and maybe it's just to bring back the ingredient of the sort of the Zen park space, the fenced off, you can walk into it and sit and talk, but it's not a zone to cross over.
Very quickly, benches.
Benches. It could be as simple as that. Yes, we have to close. You are all speak. Somebody who's not. I saw a hand there, right? Yes.
we see a lot of maps on railway lines and, Roland Kager, on railway lines and where there's highways and roads, but we never see places where there, and if we see maps of place, destinations, we always see it's an office or houses, but why don't we never see a place of the quality as a destination? And it would be very interesting how every person would draw such a map and how that would open our eyes. Hey, this is the city, so how nice is a place? And just picked it on a map.
Okay, Bart, can we make a synthesis? Is that the dwelling together, maybe? Definitely it's not mobility, it's staying, being together in a place. I think that one word, no?
One word, right to stop.
Okay, right to stop. Anyway, something like that, stopping, dwelling. Okay, Samuel is already thinking. Okay, thank you, Bart. Okay, and thank you again. Okay, now we have the next round of three and final, but it's still a very rich one. We shift a bit. Actually, the commoning will come back quite strongly. So we have all the possibility to elaborate. The first one is Anna, so I don't need to introduce her. So please, the floor is yours.
Well, while we are searching for my presentation, please don't forget to return the list, which is somewhere, this low-tech solution. I hope, yes, great. No, you don't have to do it now, just in the end, it would be nice to have it back. Otherwise, it's also a gift to the city, which is also great. But
you're going to sleep here anyway. That's probably part of the. Yeah.
So, and by the way, I don't think Luca has mentioned, we are, this event is live streamed, so that's why it's important to talk in the mic. But more generally, if you want to come back to this and to this discussion, watch it again, you can do so. Also, the lectures during the seminar series were recorded and can be found on citiesandmobilities.com. So all of this is well documented, to sum up, and you are part of this at this moment. So. I'm going to talk about scarcity and commoning, and this work comes out from the project that I did together with a number of other people. Their name is on the slide, and the paper that we wrote together is on the webpage of this program today. And in this project, we basically went around the world and looked at policies in the sphere of mobility and mobility transitions to more sustainable mobilities, sustainable cities, and so forth. And what we found out is that in almost everywhere in the world, in different countries and different cities, scarcity is one of the key notions, key concepts. So scarcity of all kinds of resources, scarcity of money, obviously, but also scarcity of time. We need to save time on our commute. Therefore, we need to build roads or railway and so forth. Of course, scarcity of road space, congestion. We need, there's not enough space on the road. And also very quickly we started noticing that different people, different parties mobilize different kind of scarcities. So you see a picture from Sao Paulo where drivers were protesting against the introduction of bike lanes, arguing that this was a reduction of scarce space and it was a theft. In Amsterdam, last year, when dockless bike shares kind of were introduced to the city, the discussion around the subsequent ban of dockless bike shares was very much revolving around the notion that our public space in Amsterdam is scarce, so we need to be very careful and so forth, and who is allowed to be using that and not, and so forth. But all of you, I'm sure, know the image in the lower part of the slide, and that shows clearly that all these scarcities are constructed by someone to a particular cause, and you can set, for example, the picture, the argument of drivers in Sao Paulo against the picture below and say, okay, well, actually there is no scarcity, maybe there is sufficiency or even abundance of space, but then abundance of space for whom? Maybe not for cars, maybe for people. I'm sure this audience is familiar with the argument. So we started to question these scarcities and pointing out that they are constructed and they can be contested. But the most important finding for me was that we can see in those debates that almost everything is deemed scarce: money, time, space. But the one thing we can't get enough of still is mobility. That we still have not reassessed the value of mobility. So we're talking about scarcity of things, but we never think maybe what is the value of mobility. And that is linked, in our opinion, to the meaning of mobility in society as we link mobility to the economic growth, and we prioritize economic growth, and we see economic growth dependent on mobility, and mobility is very much linked still with individual freedom, and automobility in particular. So what to do? The alternative that I would like to propose, the notion that I would like to propose, is common in mobility, or beginning to see mobility as a commons. And by that I mean thinking about mobility as a collective good, not just as individual freedom. And that means that we can look at how we collectively produce mobility and what effect it has on it has on us, on each other. Meaning, if I take a car, if I go on the road, that has impact on everyone in the city in one way or another, through the space that I take, through pollution, through emission, through possibility of a traffic accident. So we do this together. If I'm taking a bike, I'm also doing something. I'm co-creating a particular type of city. So we are influencing each other every day through mobility, and we need to maybe we need to focus on that rather than only on freedom and economic growth. So we can rethink the meaning of mobility and its impact, and doing that we can also possibly shift to more communal and democratic forms of governance. So these are just the examples that I usually use that I think are moving in that direction. Toekomststraat in Belgium, the future street, where people kind of together try to reimagine the street, what kind of mobilities they want to have there, think how their mobilities have impact on the way they live together. And Ring is an application that used in the Netherlands, and that visualizes what we are doing as a community to each other when we cycle, and wij is we, and so it kind of shows you your impact, and it does more things than that. I don't have time for this. So one alternative how we can rethink the meaning of mobility is to think about mobility as something that keeps communities both connected and diverse. It's the means through which we interact with each other and with the environment around us. It's something that we share. Really, that we do share mobility, we all move around, and we can collectively govern this, rather than something we can think of this in this way, rather than something that we value only when it is converted into financially equivalent square kilometers and minutes of commute. So my question to you today is, how can common mobility help us address or reject altogether the pressures of particular scarcities? Thank you very much.
Wow.
Thank you, Anna. This is the question. What is the answer? Yes.
I only thought that scarcities lead to car cities, or to scar cities, or even to war cities. And what we need is our cities.
Yeah.
So you
if I may just quickly, one of the theoreticians of commons actually called automobility a scarcity generating institution. So that's really speaks, cars generate scarcity in other ways, yeah.
And back to language, but it doesn't have to be language. It could be other anything here. Yes.
Redistribution, that's the word. Redistribution of space and the right to the use of that space.
You think in a particular way or different way than now it's done? What could be the direction?
Well, if we take the word commoning seriously here, redistribution means actually to share and understand who bears the cost of a particular land use, such as street. So only by doing that, we can in fact visualize and realize who is actually gaining of a particular, for example, investment on a street or a bike path or a pedestrian path, whatever. So I think that's the commoning, the word, what allows to do, I guess.
Just go first there, because I think, oh no, you are not, no. No.
Sorry, I know it's me again, but I think scarcity is a religion. This just comes from economics, that the world is scarce. So I think the question is already biased because there is no scarcity. It's only, of course, what you see around you is a choice that you decided to observe that space around you. And then, of course, we can talk about redistributing that scarce unit, but then you can go somewhere else. That's why we are humans, right? So then again, mobility comes in.
First.
Well, in a physical and in a philosophical sense, we have place, time, and movement. Now, place is limited. Time, we decide for ourselves if it's limited or not. Are we scarce for time, really? Or do we decide to be scarce for time? I think we can reject that. And the mobility is the means to get from one place to another. So I think the scarcity of time should be more relaxed. Scarcity of space should be more redistributed, what the former speaker said. And then the movement is in between.
You'll come back, so...
For redistribution, I would like to introduce a new standard. It's called the kilometer. You decide how many kilos everybody can travel a kilometer, so that you can divide amongst each other how many kilometers you can keep a whole lot of kilos. So if you have a car, 1,500 kilos, and you weigh 100 kilos, then, and you travel 1 kilometer, that's 1,600 kilometers. But if you bike 10 kilos and you weigh 50 kilos, then you go 1 kilometer, then you have 60 kilometers. Now, as a government, a socialist government, a good socialist government, you can decide how many kilometers the society can handle. And then you divide it by the number of people in the country, and then you're there.
Why kilo is such an important measure? What does it say about the world?
It is energy. The more kilos you transport, the more energy you use, and that's very social, because your story lacks a little bit, well, economic growth you talked about. You did talk a little bit about social cohesion, but you never talked about environmental impact. And those three should be involved in whatever you organize in policy and transport.
And I was critical of economic growth, but you are proposing to put in positively other concepts like social cohesion and sustainable environmental sustainability, and you think that kilos could be an indicator of that sort of things. Okay.
Hi, Judith de Schuren, cyclist. I might want to propose to make commoning time dependent. So at different times, divide space in different ways. For example, I do not always want to dwell and cruise and whatever on my bike. Sometimes I just want to go from A to B, especially when it rains. So maybe then I can be kick off the road because I'm not in a car and it's still raining. And maybe we should introduce like cyclists' rain priority. So you can always go in front of cars, and cars need to decide if they want to be on the streets when cyclists take priority all the time.
Okay, time as weather, yes.
on the subject of distributing the scarcity of the mobility, and since we do not all have socialist governments, maybe we need some nudging. So maybe we can learn from the health department and say, apart from having mobility scarcity, we could also have mobility obesity and try to involve and repair that. So maybe that's an interesting concept.
Back to kilos, but in a different way, even though they are connected.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess this leads me to issues of accessibility. I can imagine a scenario where my kid's school is right near where I live, and the shops and the doctors and everything I need is right near where I live. So I live in a low mobility but high accessibility environment. I guess the more mobility we need, the more the potential impacts of our mobility, and so the more we start to think about commoning as important. So for me, the idea of commoning mobility leads me to the idea of maximizing accessibility and minimizing our mobility in some ways.
In a way, you are creating abundance by shifting the focus, an abundance of accessibility by reducing mobility. Yeah.
I'm afraid we really need to come to some synthesis, hopefully, at this point.
So, just to expand a bit more, because I think one thing we haven't addressed yet is nature in the city. So I wonder also, when you talk about scarcity and limits, to something to acknowledge certain limitations or scarcities, and the logic between circulation of mobility and something is scarce. I don't know, just putting it out there, it's something maybe interesting to follow up on.
I mean, common emerges as a way of, dealing with natural resources that have limits. So there is definitely a link. But there was a hand here, but I will push for a synthesis. Now, yes.
A synthesis. Well, yeah. I think we can learn from land use planning, in which it's really normal to ask people, what do you want your environment and your city to look like? And but we hardly or never have this type of discussions on mobility. How much mobility do you prefer in your own life and for your own living environment, your neighborhood or your city or even your country? And if we have this type of open, I'm not trying to synthesize, this type of open discussions, then you might actually address all the stuff that's on there.
But there is some, you're happy having a discussion about this, and no, sorry, because the time and it's running. Even again, I was kidding, maybe we should sleep here, but until nobody sanctions that, we have to stay within the time. So I thank Anna and. And the second speaker in the round, Seger Ernstlich, is a city council member for the Green Left Party, and I have to read what's on his website. He stands for healthy, green, relaxed, free, and diverse city. Yeah. So let's hear.
Yeah, I'm going to stand here. I've written my thing down because, English. The appealing thing for me in working in the city council on the subject of mobility and traffic and public space is that everyone has a strong opinion about it. It's like football. We are all managers of the national team. We are all knowledgeable because everyone is an expert of their own mobility, and especially when something changes in their surroundings, when we change a street. People are very opinionated, emotions can run high, and I really love that because it shows an acute and urgent need to get involved. And it is an outing actually of a deeper lying involvement with the city as a whole or their neighborhoods, and people care. And if people care, it means there's something to care about, and that is good news. And in 2004, James Howard Kunstler, an American critic of architecture, gave quite a hilarious TED talk in which he says that public space should be inspired centers of civic life and the physical manifestation of the common good. But instead, he argues, what we have in America they have, is a nation of places not worth caring about. And he's talking mostly about urban sprawl, about modern architecture, and about the loss of the language of what was civic design, a body of knowledge, methods, skill, and principle to define public space through buildings and through roads, through plazas. And as he argues, the public space should inform everyone not only of where we are in a geographical sense, but also about where we are as a culture and what we deem important and what values we aspire to. And he says, more and more we are building places not worth caring about. And that's a great problem. Now going to Amsterdam. Amsterdam has the famous canals. So famous, it's a World Heritage. We saw the picture before. A World Heritage, let those words sink in. That means the value of that must be tremendous. The world cares about our canals. And this is how we use our World Heritage more often than not. Half of the space here is parking space for tin cans. You cannot even see the water. This is the Prinsengracht. And politics, and I'm a politician, I'm a city council member, is a language-oriented business. I'm going to talk about language as well. We use words as means to emphasize or to enthusiast, but also to despise or to distract. Very good at the last bit sometimes. And one central, there is also, of course, also a lot of jargon in politics. And jargon is no stranger to the world of mobility either. I try to avoid jargon. It's very difficult sometimes. I find myself talking about the model shift all the time, you know, and throughput and things like this. But I also like to talk in values. And I think we should do that more. And one central value in politics is, of course, and we heard it before tonight, also freedom. And mobility has a very direct link to freedom because the freedom to move around is central to everyone's existence. And by the way, car ads misuse this value all the time. In most car ads, you see a car zipping around on an attractive road in nature. There's no one else on the road, and there are only 1 or 2 happy people in the car going to some remote location where there are also no other people. And freedom is apparently a very solipsistic thing to experience, or as Sartre would say, hell is other people. But this shows also that ultimate freedom is maybe only possible if there are no other people. And in reality, there are, of course, lots of other people. And in good liberal sense, you could say that everyone's freedom is, of course, limited until the point where it touches other people's freedom. And this is quite literally the case when in crowded small streets in the city center, an oversized SUV drives through and pushes away all the pedestrians or cyclists. It limits other people's freedom to move around. Also, it is not fair. It's another value, fairness. It doesn't seem just, in a justice sense. And in a typical historic city center, less than 1/3 of the households have a car. 70% of the households has no car at all. And this has implications when talking about parking, because parking uses a tremendous amount of space. Typical a parking spot is about 12 square meters, and we have about 14,000 parking spots in our city center, around 400,000 in the entire city. And that only exists in public space. For the city center, that takes up about 30 to 40% of our public space. Spaces which is reserved exclusively for car owners. And you can see what happens here. 70% of the households do not hold such a claim to the public space at all. But they have the right for usage. It's their public space as well. And maybe they want to sit there on a terrace or tent to a little garden. And are they required to go for this solution? Because this was the loophole until a few years ago. This is a guy who just bought a car, got a parking permit, sawed off the roof of the car, and tended to a garden. This is not possible anymore. It was started by a guy, and then Florrie de Pater took it over. I did my research.
A collaboration.
This problem of inequality, of unfairness. I'm sorry? Yeah, that's right. Very inclusive. The problem of inequality or unfairness becomes even more apparent when we think about the city in general or about public spaces as a giant common, a communal good or a communal resource. And in the Hardin's tragedy of the commons, of course, the system of shared resources collapses when individual users acting independently according to their own self-interest behave contrary to the common good of all users by depleting or spoiling that resource through their collective action. And he's talking about unregulated resources, and the weird thing is that in assigning space for different methods of transportation, everything is very regulated, but it's not fairly distributed. And overexploitation of public space by one model, there's the model, accounts for many problems. And another one of those problems is safety. Why do we find it acceptable to have the risk of life and death that we see in our cities today? Why are so large chunks of our public space off limits for people by risk of death or serious injury? And this is, of course, the... now I got lost in my computer. Marco, can you help me?
Yeah. Our technician.
I have it here, I think. This is the picture that I think everyone knows. Shouldn't cities be the safest and cleanest places on Earth? After all, a city is a biotope for people. It's always strange to me when people say that city dwellers have to put up with danger or dirt or unhealthy surroundings. The urban jungle is in the word. And it is an outlook of life in which the rural is the normal state of being for people, and the city is seen as a place of degeneration and decay. And I refuse to adhere this notion for a city. A city to me is like a dream or a promise, a place where people can come to in search for happiness or personal growth or opportunity or emancipation. And such a place has to be accessible and tolerant and inclusive and safe. And the same goes for public space, and the same goes for mobility, I would say. And in this few minutes, I hope to have shed some different perspective and value-driven approach to the use of language. And my question for you would be, what values should we really adhere to when discussing mobility and public space?
Good 5 minutes. So now I'll be strict. I think that the question is very clear. It's what values. So not big, the analysis were all useful. Now it's considered just name values.
I'm Joris. I would say live and let live, maximize tolerance, and instead of minimizing travel time.
Okay, tolerance, values, idea about values for public space. Yes.
Well, very simple, inclusion and equality. I think that's the basis of the whole discourse.
Okay. Inclusion and equality.
Encounterability. Opportunities to have encounters.
Encounterability. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It's a nice word. Encounterability.
Does it exist? It's a nice word. I don't know whether it exists, but it's very nice.
To meet people. And yeah. So, but that's a people-oriented approach, yeah?
Values, yes?
Perhaps avoid superordinate goals. That is, values that become big, instead of having several values that you consider at the same time.
Examples of a big and a nasty and a small and nice value?
Nasty, economic growth. A nice one, equality.
But that's also big.
Yes, they are. And so avoid combining one or two and consider them to be the thing.
Values.
I'd say the value honesty, and that's honesty in communication, so you're not applying for a parking permit for a parking subsidy. And why do you need that?
Okay.
Different approach.
Honesty.
I already know the synthesis. The synthesis will be values, because we are not reducing this diversity, but they're all values.
Hi, my name is Bart from the presentation before.
He's a little bit confused.
Yeah. So parking is actually privatization of public space, right? But what do we do with the 14,000 places that produce money every hour? €5 an hour. So we should maybe try to find out what costs €5 an hour for that space. But I do have an idea.
Value.
If people park the car on the Prinsengracht and it's €5 an hour, but you have to hand over the key and it becomes a co-working space for us in the meantime, because the problem with the car is that it's not used when it's dead, right? Yeah. So how to open up the space again and to co-work in the parking lot.
So tourists can picnic in your car.
So is it sharing then the value? Yes.
Yeah, Charles. I think we should put more value on pleasure. A lot of mobility is discretionary. If moving is uncomfortable, we don't do it. So we should value pleasure of public spaces.
Pleasure is a clear word. There was a hand there, and we closed. No, we closed. We already a nice range.
I would say we should pay more attention to accessibility and openness.
Accessibility and openness.
Openness, accessibility. I think it's getting almost, now it is moving in a way. So I see you are kind of emotional, but we have to stop, thanks.
No, that's a shame.
No, it's the beginning, this is the beginning, remember? So if you like this, you are in a position where you can keep this going. So we have the third and last third of the round and last speaker here. Last but not least is Ananda Groth. She worked for Shared NL. It's about, yes. So culture, shared economy, shared mobilities are thing, and again, I again found a series of words that I need to read because they all start with an I in this case. So her work is about inspiration, intelligence, interaction, and insights. Wow.
Okay, so we already discussed before that we're probably going to always keep on traveling for 1.5 hours, and we also, I think, commonly agree that, you know, the street space before that was owned by everybody is not really what we have today, and that we want to find a solution to get rid of all these cars. So that's already been discussed. Let's talk about how we can solve that. We can solve that, I think, by limiting mobility, or we can solve that by thinking about alternatives, and that's what I want to focus on today. So as sharing is not really new as a solution for parking problems, traffic problems, and what was the other thing again? Well, use of public space, because Witcar and the White Bicycle Plan have already been invented in 1965. Real sharing, or for example, car sharing has started 25 years ago in the Netherlands, but it's only really, and this is a snapshot history of shared mobility, 10 years, I think, that we start to see what we call new forms of mobility, like platform mobility, like you could call it. Empty seats since 2006, free floating since about 2011, peer-to-peer car sharing exists about 6 years because, yeah, there are all these cars doing nothing in the street. So talking about abundance versus scarcity, here we have one. Micro-transit on demand, something of the last year or the last 2 years, popping up in almost every city around the world. Free-floating bicycles, e-scooters, kick steps, think about what have you. You see them here, and many more to come. I think this is just the beginning. So, you know, what does this do to our cities? We think about scarcity, we think about we have too little public space to facilitate all these new forms of mobility. And you see things, people being creative, like pick-up and drop-off points for Lyft and Uber, for example, because they don't have any fixed infrastructure in cities. You see people thinking, especially non-users, that our space is scarce and we should not have all these new things in our already crowded public space. But I really think that it's not about scarcity, because if we really think about all this 50% of space that cars is taking up in our space, in our public space, we have space enough. So if we would get rid of this 50%, we would have a lot of place for all these new forms of mobility and these alternatives. Because this is one space for a car, it would host a lot of bicycles, of course, or kick scooters or steps or what have you. So one thing I find really disturbing is that all these new forms of alternatives are starting to compete between each other. Which one is the best one? While I think we all have a, let's say, a common enemy. We can say that tonight. You can't say that outside of this room. But I think it's the car that we need to battle and not each other that we need to battle. It's about 100 years, I think, that certain alternatives exist, like public transport, cycling, walking, and they haven't managed to really get the majority of the people out of their car. So I believe that at this moment we need to really facilitate people, make it easy for them to abandon their cars and to keep on having that freedom to move. There is this big thing, I think, about, you know, everybody wants to operate in the grachtengordel, in the center of Amsterdam, and I don't think we want that necessarily. But it's also understandable from the point of view of these new businesses, because they have to have a sustainable business model. They are private companies, they're not public transport. So of course you don't want to put your car or your bicycle or what have you in a place where nobody's gonna book it. And I think if, from a city perspective, we want to, we want to really have a solid transport system, we need to think about desirability versus the sustainable business model of these private partners. Or in other words, we need to look at the blurring boundaries between public transport and private transport, because public transport is subsidized. What if we would also broaden the definition of public transport and include certain modes of private transport, subsidize them, and by doing that, having more control on where you want to place and which things you want to place and why? So, coming to the question I want to ask you is, how do we give new mobility concepts, many more to come, like I said, room and rules to prove their added value in the total system and reduce the dominant role of the privately owned car? And keep in mind, or that's my 5 points, that we had 100 years of experience with the private car. We only have 10 years of experience with all these new forms. So maybe we also need to learn. We still think that asphalt, new tarmac is a solution for giving room to cars. So we haven't learned our lessons after 100 years. We can't expect to learn lessons after 10 years. The second one, we need to compete with each other, or can we make it all work together? And we have good, better, best. Of course, I think that everybody should cycle and that we should all use public transport, but it's probably not going to happen. So let's also think about good, better, best, private versus public, and dialogue versus polarization, because sometimes you zoom in a lot and you see some negative effects, but let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture and talk to each other and see how we can solve this together.
Okay. So this is the last round, the last act of generosity. I mean, already somebody coming up. And here is the question, the help that's being asked, how to give space in way, but also in which, and rules as well, in a way that create added value.
Sorry, it's me again, Charles. This is very close to my heart, this about how do you give new mobility concepts. A lot of this depends on public procurement, and public procurement is based on price and quality. There is no mechanism to involve innovation, and we need to, much as Europe would like to introduce innovation into public procurement, you need to have that. No city is going to place a contract on something which might fall over, but it's innovative. So there needs to be a way that if one city is takes the risk, it is underwritten at a national level. If it works, other cities benefit by it. If it doesn't, they don't take the hit. So
So allow failures. Yeah. To learn, of course, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it strikes me we need to give more room to other ideas of active travel, scooters and skateboards and things like that, which might appeal more to kids, for example, to displace the idea of cycling as standing for all active travel. If you want to displace car use, then, all forms of active travel should be valid. So we need to make room for those kind of mobility concepts.
More diversity and also fit into different kinds of people lifestyle. Is this a hand? No, it's just yes.
Maybe also more than diminishing the place of the car in cities, also make the place of improve the place, the way we use the car in cities. For example, in Paris, the average of number of people in one car is 1.1, and if we reach 1.9, there is no more congestion in Paris region. So it's also about people who cannot stop using their car, also make them change how they use it and make them sharing it to use them better and to make their life better for all of them.
This is, by the way, everywhere. The European average is 1.2, and if we would indeed increase to 2 or 2.6, we would need only less than 10% of all cars.
I keep this.
Thanks, Ananda. Yeah, I mean, obviously, since I also work in this, I want to probably raise a question on how come and why we have politicians of Amsterdam here in the room. It's also
No. You can only give an answer. No, really. You have to talk strictly an answer to that question. Sorry. Time. No, but there is a task which is giving answers, so that's the only rule. Anybody can do that.
We have to acknowledge that a car is not for moving alone, but also for being in a private space. Many people enjoy driving a car because it's the only time in the day they're really alone. They can fart, sing, big nose. So maybe we should have like spaces for privacy, and then that doesn't need to move.
Yeah, privacy. You need to that there is privacy allowed in these things. I think there was. You were there.
Absolutely.
Answer. That's the only rule.
Of course, when you introduce shared cars, which I think is only an expansion of the number of cars in the city, then you should take away at least 16 car parking spaces, because that is what a shared car does. So take away car parking spaces when you introduce one shared car.
That varies per city how much it replaces, and per form of car sharing.
If you have an answer, I come back to you. Have an answer?
Change policy. I mean, how come car drivers, like leasers, can bring in any car, whereas if it's a company that leases temporarily, so only the difference is only time. One, I rent a car for 1 hour. The other one, I rent a car for 1 month. I can bring in any car to the city if it's for 1 month, but if it's only for 1 hour I rent, the city will tell me what kind of car it needs to be, or may it be car share, scooter share, whatever share.
Well, maybe we have in the Netherlands something called a right to challenge, that if as citizens you think you can do something better, you're allowed to take over certain tasks. And maybe it's interesting to experiment with that for mobility concepts as well, that you think, well, maybe we could use this street differently and have the same or higher societal goals. I think that would be worth experimenting with.
Right to challenge.
Yeah, I think it would be important because this field evolves very quickly, and it's important that as a city we acknowledge that we don't have the answer and we're just going to try and acknowledge that maybe we will fail, but that's okay because won't make too much cost for the city.
That was restated the first point, which was creating an environment, institutional environment where that's possible. Yes.
Maybe I'm not enough informed, but where is the common in here of the mobility? I mean, I we're talking about, we're not really rethinking.
Answer.
My answer to this question, there is no common in here. That's my answer. We're talking about just doing the same in a different way that probably is not going to reduce anything. It's going to just promote mobility.
Is there a way to do this in a way that does go to? I mean, I would challenge you to. What is that?
I think, as the person before me said, seriously reduce the parking, make some sort of public system of sharing, not private, but public, in fact.
I think the answer is you have to be really very specific about which area you're going to do what. Because in places where these type of innovations are now live and also have a business case, the cars are not that dominant there after all, so it's city centers. But and I'm not sure if you want all these cars are not dominant there for a reason, because mobility is not the main reason for existing in city centers. It's the public space and the interaction. But so you have to be very specific. Where can you add this value? You probably can add it more in places that are really now dominated by cars, which are not the city centers, but suburbs, or how can you connect them with shared systems to public transport or something like that?
Many people are connecting the mobility concept to value in the sense of public space, meaningful and connected. But I can't take any more. It's the time has gone. No, I can take more, but the time can't.
I think we can discuss more.
Yes. But there is one very important last thing, but I thank you now for this, and Marco, and also Marco. So this is really the last few minutes. So Samuel has made this impossible effort of summarizing. And again, these things are there. Okay. Well, no, not that. Yes. Okay, so now we do a final game. So, of course, these are synthesis, and it's also here not the point to say I agree, not agree. There's no time for that. There is after drinks, following days, but it's attempts to synthesize the 7 rounds of brainstorm. So what we ask you here, and it's really just as a beginning again, it's not to say what is the more important one, what is the least, what I like more or less, what is better or less well expressed. Just pick the one of all this. If you read this list, which is the one on which, and maybe we need, but okay, no, maybe you can first read it and then we show that. Pick the one on which you are going, you feel like acting tomorrow, and maybe even acting after in a few minutes. To just pick one, just your very free personal, free or no, or common, whatever, but your choice of what is about this, all these things, the one that you are most attracted, stimulated to take on. And then, okay, so you have made this choice. Use your instinct, pick a number, because then we shift to a different slide where you still have a sort of a bridge, so you still have some reminder. So just go on that website, tick in that code, and make your choice. Again, it's not saying what is best or what should get political priority or scientific priority. What you personally are attracted, are feel a call to do something about tomorrow.
So, and people that watch this on the live stream, if you are there, you can also vote.
Yeah, of course, yes. So we see if you have thousands of people, so we just watch this happen.
Sure. Why not? Not anymore.
And really, it's not a contest, but. Okay, but it's well, but I'll explain what to do with this. I know there's so many competitiveness. Is this the right way to go, Pascal? Anyway, so we can, let me with this moving target, maybe it's appropriate that is still changing in an evening about citizen mobilities. It's good that we finish with a moving slide that moved by all your choices, interactions between what you see. The idea here again is if you have the time, it would be very great to ask somebody, which I will not do, so don't think I will get you this possibility, but to say why you chose that. Really more going into personal motivation, why you're attracted, why you think you want, you can do something about that. So we will not do here, but what I propose is that this is what you could ask, could be the first thing to ask to somebody else when we finish this event right now, and see this as a nice way to start a conversation with each other and inquire on some of the motivation that some other people here can have to make that choice. What is here happening?
Sorry, that wasn't me just playing around.
Okay. But I think, okay, so the playing with...
Now it's counting.
Okay, this playing with images is also... Sam will stop because...
Let's go back because this one is not correct.
Anna, do you want to say a last thing?
I want to say thanks to everyone, to the speakers, but to the audience. I think it has been amazing. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we all learned something from it, and I hope we'll be staying in touch. Thank you very much.